Roar!
Ew. Twilight Loses Her Quill by Sneaky. You've got to be kidding. Twilight was in the zone. The zone. She was halfway through the overwhelming pile of paperwork she'd been assigned for the day, and it was only noon. She was ahead of schedule, one of the paramount and most important reasons for this being her focus. The newest Princess of Equestria's talent in the art of immense concentration not only followed for her to completely immerse herself in her work, but also to let everything around her melt into an indistinguishable blur. The goal of overcoming the threatening pile of paperwork before her becoming her sole focal point. In layman's terms, she ignored everything. No heed was taken to the intense growling of her stomach, or the dry throat she had from drinking nothing but coffee since this morning. She could have sworn she heard knocking at the door, and perhaps even a certain baby dragon expressing his worry over her before giving up and stomping away. But she was so intent on her job that nothing could distract her. Well, almost nothing. There was just one thing. She had to pee. That urge, that pressure on her bladder that made her fidget with every paper completed. She could only ignore it for so long before she threw down her quill, dropped her current paper on the top of the stack and made a speedy dash to the bathroom.
Stupid coffee!
She soon returned, feeling much better after relieving herself. She glanced at the wall clock, curious but almost not wanting to know how much time she'd spent in the bathroom.
2 minutes!
She blinked.
Not bad, actually.
She sat down at her desk, straightening her stack of papers and set them back down. Closing her eyes and humming to herself, she went to pick up her quill. She peeked an eye open. Her quill wasn't there. She lifted her papers, checking first under the completed ones and then the unfinished stack. She harumphed. She checked the rug under the desk, thinking she may have dropped it. No such luck. While she was down there, she decided to look under her chair, and then behind her desk, the sides of the desk, the area behind her chair. She paused her searching to take a look at the clock. The princess sighed. She had just wasted 5 whole minutes looking for an easily replaceable feather. She returned to her position on the chair and took a deep breath. Then, finally relaxed, she opened her desk drawer and pulled out her box of new quills. Upon seeing the contents, she groaned. The box was empty. Again, she returned to the task of searching for the one she had been using before this mini-catastrophe had befallen her. She began looking into more unlikely places than before, including, but not limited to, underneath the flower pot, inside the flower pot, in her coffee mug, the spot where she was sitting, on a nearby windowsill, inside a drawer, in the flower pot again. The thought crossed her mind that maybe she could just go to the supply office and get another box. But when her eyes drifted across the clock, she knew that would take much too long. She wanted to be done with her paperwork before lunch, and meandering around the castle would get her nowhere. Not only that, but long-distance teleportation had the potential to set off a multitude of alarms. She didn't want to have to explain to a squadron of guards that, no, she wasn't in danger, that no pony had to check her pulse, blood, or urine, and that she had simply needed a quill and had teleported to the supply office to get one. But, well, perhaps the actions taken may be a bit uncharacteristic for a princess, so bent on rules and regulations, but... What? Changing? No! Twilight shook her head. What was she doing? She needed to find her quill and, more importantly, get back to work. As time passed, and she still did not have her quill, she grew more and more agitated. After a while, the thought began to fester in her mind that if she had just gone and gotten another box of quills, she'd be back by now and possibly almost done. However, she'd already thrown in her chips and absolutely needed, to find this darned feather.
Hey, Twilight. What?
Twilight lashed out, whipping around to face the intruder. There little Spike stood in her doorway, arms shaking, holding a small box. He blinked, his surprised, wide eyes mimicking the expression of one who had just been stabbed.
I saw that you were almost out of quills earlier, so I went to go pick up some.
He held out the box, which had a picture of an eggshell white feather and was labeled quills.
Here you go. Sorry to disturb you.
Twilight, who had been simmering in her anger for the past 15 minutes, suddenly felt herself dipping into an icy cold bath of shame.
Spike, No, it's okay.
He turned his head away.
I should have known better than to bother you while you're working.
The small dragon set the box of quills down on his older sister's rug and then scampered away with his tail between his legs. Twilight flew to the door to go after him, but by then he was out of sight and could have gone either way down the hall. Begrudgingly, the elegant princess levitated the new box over to her desk, taking the old one and throwing it a bit forcefully into the waste bin. She opened up the pack of quills, dipped one of the tips in the inkwell, and began writing. By the time she had gotten done with the first packet, she was starting to get back into the flow of things. She still felt awfully guilty about what she'd done to Spike, and a lingering frustration from the past half hour hung about her head. But she decided that she would make it up to her #1 assistant by taking him out for ice cream at his favorite ice cream parlor. And who knew? Maybe a good time with one of her lifelong friends would do her some good as well. She levitated the first packet up and off the pile of incomplete paperwork, glad to be that much closer to freedom. She readied herself and began to read the first few lines of the next package when there sat her quill. She'd set her paper down on top of her quill. And of all the places she looked, suddenly the paper she was holding fell, knocking over the inkwell and staining the top left corner of her desk and a good portion of the bottom of the pile of finished paperwork. That day, all of Equestria heard the frustrated princess. Author's note. Based upon real-life events. Thanks go to my proofreader, H.W. Rogers, for proofreading and my pen, for I have never thought of this story without him. Hello everyone, this is Visual Pony from Pony&Wolf Productions, and I thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to this video. At this point, I want to thank all of our amazing patrons on Patreon for supporting this channel with their monthly donations and keeping the lights on around here. Now, more than ever, it is important that you support your favorite content creators, because due to YouTube's new content policy changes, we, along with other content creators, had to demonetize a lot of our most profitable videos. For us, those are the Fallout Equestria stories. As you can see on the graph on screen right now, our earnings per video used to be relatively okay, even though the earnings were never enough for a viable career. It was enough for a good, decent side income. Now we are struggling to pay our bills. If you want to support us for as little as $1 a month, you can do so by clicking on our Patreon link down in the description below. And you can get wonderful perks like, for example, early access to all of our stuff. Sometimes things like this are recorded months in advance. Voice acting lessons from me or Midnight, if you really want to. And you can join our Patreon Discord server. Even though it may look like there's not much going on in there, I am actually checking it on the daily. Thank you for listening to this message, and I wish you a wonderful, wonderful day.